Hi, my name is Rick Miller. I'm the executive director of Gay Sons and Mothers. We have an incredible surprise for you. Jeanne Manford, who founded Pflag 50 years ago, who's no longer with us, has been so influential with Pflag, with any LGBTQ person. And we got to interview her daughter, Suzanne, who speaks about her mother, the work that she's done. Please watch this. It's an incredible video. So, welcome, Suzanne Swan, to Gay Sons and Mothers. My name is Rick Miller, and it is a complete privilege to have you here today. Your mother was the woman that started PFLAG, and it wasn't called PFLAG back then. I forgot what it was called. Do you happen to know what it was?
The first meeting was in 1973, and they had about 20 people, and they called it Parents of Gays, or POG.
And that was 50 years ago. It's so incredible to think that a regular mother becomes a hero, and all she was doing was probably what so many mothers do that I've spoken to in this project, which is advocate for the safety of their sons. What is the age difference between you and Morty, and what was your relationship like when you were growing up?
I was 3 years older than Morty,
Yeah.
and we had our separate lives. I cared for Morty, I respected him, but he had his friends and I had mine, and we were regular kids, and we had breakfast and dinner at home and lunch in school, and I didn't know. Frankly, I've met one of his good friends just recently within the last 10 years, as compared to when we were young. I really didn't know his friends.
Mm-hmm.
He had his life.
3 years doesn't seem like a big deal now, but I know from my siblings that 3 years is a totally different life. Did you
Yeah,
know that he was different or suspect that he might have been gay when he was growing up?
I had no idea, and
Interesting.
nobody did. He
Wow.
was masculine. He was a big, strong young man. He looked like my father. Dad used to call him a twin when he was
Wow.
young. Hey,
Hmm.
twin. But there was never a clue. And I don't know when he knew. I think it was probably fairly young from just what I've gathered since then.
And what about your mother? Do you think she knew that he was different? And
She had no idea. My older brother died young. He was 22. And Morty, he was 16 when my older brother died.
hmm,
And he told my parents he wanted to see a psychiatrist. And there
wow.
was no question about what or why he would go and see the psychiatrist because he wanted to.
Mhm.
And the psychiatrist outed him. He was furious.
Well, what's
And he
what's interesting about this is it was during a time where the Psychiatric Association was having a lot of arguments about whether homosexuality would qualify as an illness or not. And it sounds
yes,
like he went to the right person, or maybe not, who had ideas about how it should be handled and dealt with in that era, which is unfortunate.
it it was a lot of tension, a lot of anger in the house. He refused to believe that my mother loved him,
Oh,
that you could accept it, that this was
really?
okay. I remember how upset they were. I wasn't really part of the argument. I wasn't there for it. But Morty was unable to accept my mother's love until that letter in the New York Post came out. He wrote in that letter that these are young men. All they want to do is to be contributing members to society, to be able to be free, and they need help from an outside community
Yes.
to help. The parents are what became the bridge
Yes.
between the gay and the straight community,
Mhm.
because gay people had been demonstrating for eons before, for decades. For it was never accepted until the straight community joined them.
Yeah.
That's why she became the hero, because she told parents that they were allowed to love their children, that their
Thank
children
God.
were healthy, that their children were perfectly normal.
Is this characteristic of what your mother was like and how you knew your mother, advocating and being as generous and as loving and vocal as she was?
Not how I knew my mother. I
Interesting.
mean, she was a loving mother. You know, she worked hard. She came home. She did lesson plans. She cooked dinners. That's how I knew my mother. There
Yeah.
was no, they had a lot of friends, my parents. They had parties. They had the Democratic Club at the house a couple times.
Mhm.
But I remember uh, marching with her. I might have been 9 or 10, and marching with her for Albert Shanker and a teachers' union. But that's about as political as I remember anything being. It's just somebody hurt her kid.
Wow.
And how dare he?
Do you remember when your brother was attacked? And I mean, I know you weren't living at home at the time, how your mother handled it.
I wasn't there. I was told, and I saw a picture of him in the newspaper.
Mhm.
I couldn't recognize him. His face was so swollen.
Wow.
How she handled it was probably that very night or very soon, within a couple of days, when she wrote the letter to the New York Post. I mean, she probably went to the hospital and stayed with him.
Yeah.
But when she had pen and paper available, she wrote the letter. The New York Post was the only one that printed the letter. She sent it to a number of them.
Mhm.
She wrote in that letter, these are young men who are fighting for their right to speak and be seen and to have an apartment, to have a job, to
Yeah.
fighting for their civil rights. And she also wrote in that letter that this isn't a job that they can do alone, that they need help
Yay.
from the straight community and what we now call the ally community.
Yes. Yeah. I'm thinking about what you said earlier, that your mother was doing what most mothers would do, which was making sure that their son is safe. She wasn't afraid to speak at a time when people didn't speak about such things, and the right people heard her.
That letter to the Post caused an uproar. Morty was living in Manhattan at the time. Mom's house is in Queens. And he said his phone was going nonstop because
Mm-hmm.
of that letter.
Yeah.
And that's when he could accept that she loved him.
Wow.
That was what proved to him she was willing to do this. She
Mm-hmm.
completely came out, completely unabashed. She never thought twice about it. She loved him.
Which is not unusual in the research that I've done, that there's an extra powerful bond, frequently unspoken, sometimes unknown, between the mother and son. And that it does go back to an innate sense of protection or an innate caring, because in some ways he's different from other kids. What's interesting is that Morty didn't know that your mother loved him or as much as she did, and it's possible that his own judgments about being gay caused him to feel unlovable himself and couldn't trust that she actually loved him as much as she did.
He knew my parents loved us, but he couldn't believe that she could accept the homosexuality. Or my father. And my father had a harder time.
Mm-hmm. Not
Um,
unusual.
but Morty brought his friends around and they talked. They talked for hours.
Wow.
And my dad was right there at every meeting and every march.
Mm-hmm.
My dad loved Morty too.
It's an incredible
This
story
is
about, again, she was just doing something that many mothers do at, except at a time where people didn't speak up as much. And she became the mother and the mother figure for so many people.
people would come to the house, people who were thrown out of their homes by their families,
Mhm.
young men
Yeah.
in their teens, and stayed with my parents. My father was a dentist, and he had an office in the house for a while.
Mhm.
He fixed people's teeth who we couldn't.
Yeah.
As one person wrote, they were everybody's mother and father. That
So
there
your
were,
mother was still your mother this whole time.
yeah. When things happened, she loved it. When as she was older,
Mhm.
uh, the New York Manhattan Public Library had a display. Morty had long since died,
Right.
but we went to see the display, and she did this to me a couple of times. She would say, "Don't talk about me. Don't tell people it's me. I just want to go there and see it."
Ah,
And then
okay. Yeah.
she would, excuse me, she would be there, and there were pictures and posters and things, and some young men would come in, and she said, "Yeah, when I was there," and they would love her.
Oh my gosh,
This
of
is
course.
you.
Right.
So here I am, not saying anything, and not,
She gave herself away.
and she loved it, and the
Oh,
attention was fabulous.
oh,
She got letters. Uh, she was living with me as she got older. In uh, she missed New York terribly. She
yeah.
always wanted to go back,
Yeah. You're
but
on the
she
West
got
Coast.
letters. Yeah, yeah, we're in San Francisco, and she'd get hundreds of emails for her birthday when she was
Oh,
80. She got letters, and uh, I printed many of them out. Uh, she got many physical letters,
mhm.
um, and it just made her feel so good.
How many years did your mother live with you towards the end of her life?
About 13,
Oh, a long time.
yeah.
So,
She came to San Francisco Pflag a couple of times. There was one video of her,
mhm,
and uh, she came even before. So there was at least two or three times maybe, because she'd come out and visit with me, and we'd go to the Pflag.
yeah,
There's We went on several marches, and one of the last marches, there was a pic. I took a photo of her with a group of transvestites,
oh wow, yeah,
and they were beautiful. They were all
uh,
dressed up and wigged, and you know, big people. And mom was, I don't know, 5'1" by that time, little gray-haired old lady, and
yeah.
she's beaming. She loved it.
So one of the things about you that I'm impressed with is that you don't seem to be competitive with your mother, and you let her deserve the credit that she deserved and soak it in. And it's just so beautiful.
I'm not competitive with my mother. My mother did all of this. She traveled, but both of my parents. My father went on radio and television and the newspapers and marched. He died young. He was
Mhm.
62 when he died, but he deserves every bit as much credit, except that she was the first one. She
Yeah.
was in the march.
Uh-huh.
The U.S., and I think in large part for my mother and my father,
Mhm.
became freer and more accepting. I often feel guilty that I'm the one being interviewed. I mean, my brother would have been amazed, would
Yeah.
have, with all of what he had to go through to make
Yeah.
this happen. They did
Yeah.
it. They made it
Amazing.
happen.
Yeah.